I'm sure that you guys have other things since it is 6 o'clock on Friday night, but this was the only night this week that I could do this in the evening time. So I'm glad that we had a couple people come. So um, my name is Sarah Gillum. I am the principal of West Valley. And I am so excited that we just made it through what I referred to as our soft opening. We had freshmen who are new to the building and returning in person come back today. So I'm guessing, I haven't pulled attendance, but maybe right around 100 kids. So we got to kind of test out some of the routines that we've put in place and kind of see where we still have a little bit more room for improvement, which we know we're going to have to modify things and improve as we go. But it was just really great to have some kids come back into the building and to just kind of see how things work. So I'm going to go through some of the basic pieces that we've put into place for the returning to in-person students. I know we still have a lot of students who are going to remain remote, so I'm going to try to highlight some of the changes that we're making to accommodate the in-person students that I know will impact them. And of course, I'm going to hopefully answer most of the questions that I've frequently gotten, but I know there's always more questions. So at any point in time, you can stick those in the chat, or there's a Q&A function in a webinar too, so you can put them in there and I will be sure to answer them. So the first thing, we learned today, we were going to open doors at 9. I don't think that's going to be enough time to get, 350 kids into the building. So we're going to open doors around 8:50 is our current estimate now of when we'll first open doors to let kids into the building. We're going to have 3 different doors open. So of course the bus doors will be open for bus kids. And then we're going to ask that, if you have the last name A through M, if you're a driver or a drop off, that you drop your students off at the front doors, that second set of doors when you're coming into West Valley. And then if you have the last name N through Z, we're going to encourage you maybe to try the pack doors, which is actually the first set of doors that you come to when you're coming through that one-way drop off at West Valley. And we'll kind of see how it goes. That's just to try to help spread out. One thing that we know is that those high congregate times where you have lots of mixing kids is something that, I know that the CDC and the Smart Start guidance really try to help mitigate as much as you can. So this is how we're going to try to help do that, is just to spread out the drop-offs just a little bit more in the morning time so that we have just fewer kids. And at the end of the day too, of course, students can leave out both sets of doors too. It is a big shift in times from what we typically have done. So if you're new to West Valley, probably not a big deal. If you're a long time returner West Valley, classes start at 9:15. So that is when we've had classes starting all year, or when my morning meeting has started, first semester. So classes start at 9:15, then it ends at 2:45. And our hope is to try to have all students out of the building by 3. So buses leave 7 minutes after the last bell, which is 2:45, so about 2:52. And then we're hoping to get all of the students who drive or who are picked up by 3 p.m. is our goal. Of course, this year our priority is really the safety of staff and students and staff. That's really our priority. And so one of the big things that I know staff have really worked through this year, and as we phase students in, is becoming familiar with what's called the daily decision tree for students. And we've had some students who've been back in activities, and I think they've become really familiar with it too, is just the sequence of questions to ask yourself in your head to determine if you should go to school to that day. So for example, of course, if you've traveled outside of Alaska in the last 14 days, which probably not many of us have, but then there's guidance from the state of Alaska about how long you have to strictly social distance until, for a set amount of time, and a negative test result in different pieces there. So if you've traveled outside of Alaska, if you're returning from a trip, there is a set amount of time you have to quarantine before you can come back to school. Another really important one is if anyone in the student's household has been sick or tested positive for COVID. So, we've had, situations, right, where maybe someone in your house is sick and is awaiting test results. So maybe, you as a family are deciding to quarantine until you get those test results in case it may be a close contact. Maybe someone in your household has tested positive, and then there are specific quarantine rules for those close contacts of that person who tested positive for COVID. So if, any of those situations happen, there are some quarantine rules around that. And any questions around that, never hesitate to call myself, to call our school nurse, Corrine Rowe. We are here to help support you through those scenarios. We know that, public health has been super busy, and so we're here to support as we've worked in conjunction with them to try to help navigate. We certainly don't supplant public health. That, of course, whatever they tell you is first and foremost. But just, especially our nurse has become really familiar with those guidelines. And then, of course, the next piece is all of those symptoms that, one thing that I think we've learned over time is that, symptoms that normally maybe wouldn't trigger, a reaction of, oh, I absolutely cannot go to school. Now, those symptoms are many of the same symptoms that are those first signs of COVID. And as some, younger people have experienced, that they don't even have as severe symptoms. So fever, chills, cough, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose. Oh, I spelled nausea wrong, or vomiting and diarrhea. So any of those symptoms, do not send your student to school. If they come to school and they exhibit any of those symptoms, we will also be calling you to come pick them up. And then there's a process of, a quarantine period with a negative test result, and the negative test result, if you have a negative test result and aren't exhibiting symptoms anymore, then, you can return to school. And all of that is worked through our nurse, Corrine Rowe, again, that she'll connect with you directly about how to work through that. So when somebody asked, so today was just the first day for freshmen. So if you missed it wasn't for all students that are returning to school. Today was just our first day for freshmen. We used to call that Ignition Day, where the freshmen got to come in for a day. So classes in general haven't started yet. And if a freshman missed today, it's not a big deal. We will certainly be right there to support them on February 1st too, in terms of finding classes and making sure that they have everything that they need to make their way around the school. So, okay. Next thing, and so I have described it, and I apologize if you've listened to me talk before, because I'm sure I've said this before. I have described, and I think I got it from Dr. Ann Zink, the Chief Medical Officer for the state of Alaska, who's described, all of the mitigation measures as like layering slices of Swiss cheese, that, each individual mitigation may not catch 100% of everything. There might be some little holes in it, but as we layer those slices of Swiss cheese on top of each other, that increases just increases overall protections, and that we can layer those mitigation, right? So following the decision tree is that first most important layer of protection, that if someone is symptomatic or, could potentially be a close contact and hasn't started exhibiting symptoms yet, that we want to stop that contact. And same thing with the quarantines. If you are a close contact, that we want to break that chain of transmission, that the sooner that you can start quarantine, if you might possibly have been exposed or be exhibiting symptoms, that can help stop the transmission to other people from there. So that's our first. And I have a link on here, bit.ly/FNSBSD decision tree will always take you to the most recent decision tree. So we know that there's been changes over the year as travel quarantines and different things have changed. The general quarantines have changed. This will always take you to the most updated decision tree. Okay. So the next little layer of mitigation, of course, is that everybody wears a mask in the building, and a mask that covers both your nose and your mouth, because the goal of the mask, both protecting you from the air I may be breathing, but then also protecting me from the air that you may be breathing. So the mask, to be effective, has to cover both your nose and your mouth. And they're required at all times, including on the school bus. As soon as a student gets out of their car, we are asking that they have their mask on, which right now in the wintertime is just like an added benefit. We are asking students to provide their own masks, because, everybody's a little bit different in what type of masks that they like. We certainly do have masks for students at school if they, just happen to forget, or the strap breaks or become soiled or anything like that. So we do have masks available at school, but just because we know people like different types of shoes because they're more comfortable. We also certainly recognize that, we want your student to have a mask that they're comfortable in all day. Next one, of course, is the physical distancing. So we will, oh, and there's another typo I forgot to correct. We will do our best to maintain 6 feet of physical distancing at all times while students are in the building. One thing to note is that classes have varying numbers of students returning. So um, and I'll talk about this later, about 50% of our students are returning in person. Um, that doesn't mean that it balances out really nicely to 50% of every single class. So that is something that, just the way that it works just means that it's not like a perfect cut in half pie in every classroom. Some classes have more students than 50% of the class, some students have less than 50% of the class. So we're going to do our best to maintain that 6 feet of social distancing. But we do know that in some larger classes, it may not be able to be the full 6 feet. It may be a little bit less. It may be 3 feet. And then, of course, during, like I said, those high congregate times, like passing periods, coming to school, leaving school, lunchtime, we're going to do our best to maintain as much space between students as possible. The way we have our seating set up, and you'll see that a little bit later in the cafeteria and commons and pack, we do allow 6 feet of social distancing between students while they're eating lunch. And the next one, of course, which really good hand hygiene. This is a priority all the time during this season, and especially now, right? So hand hygiene and cleaning. We have hand sanitizer throughout the school. I think it's outside every single classroom. And then all classrooms also have hand sanitizer in them. All classes also have access to gloves and wipes, and we'll be having students help us in cleaning classes at the end of class or at the start of class to prepare it for the next round of students coming in. And of course, soap and water for 20 seconds is always best. And we'll talk about, there will be bathroom breaks during class. So of course we want students to wash with soap and water then, but of course we, always have that hand sanitizer available too. So what will classes look like? And I have these little green question marks throughout the presentation, and that's just where I'm reminding myself that that was a question that a parent sent in and asked. So almost exactly half of our students who are in our blended remote model are choosing to come back in person. So these were the numbers that I pulled today: about 346 students returning in person, and then about 355 remaining remote. There was still some families that we hadn't made a decision, or we hadn't been able to hear from yet, but that was the numbers that we had, and it's really stayed really split 50-50 in that way. Teachers will be teaching, both in-person and remote students at the same time, but all of our classes are so different. How they go about doing that may look a little bit different in any class. Some teachers may do it synchronously. Some teachers may do part at a time, part at a different time. So teachers should have by today sent out an email to parents and students, so that remote students, especially, this is really important for you if you're staying remote. When do you need to log into the class? Are you going to be logging into class at the same time as you always have? Is it going to be a slightly different time? So certainly watch for those emails from teachers. If you haven't heard from them, reach out to teachers or reach out to me so I can get you in contact with those teachers. And they'll help give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect for especially those students who are staying remote now that other students are going to be in the class. Oops, wrong way. Okay, so what does a day look like? So I joke that I've made like 4,000 bell schedules, and then I always find an error in them. So this is the new bell schedule that we started today. It's slightly tweaked in the sense that, the passing times between classes change just a little bit. And it also adds in what we refer to as SSP, which is our student support period. And so for that, block time in the middle of the day, you go to, your second period teacher has a zone. And in most cases, your second period teacher is also your SSP teacher. We do have a few students, just because of the way schedules worked out, that have a different teacher for their SSP. But in most cases, it's the same teacher. And so remote students will have SSP and in-person students will have SSP. So again, watch for an email and a Google Classroom code from your teacher, where they'll be inviting you to your SSP class to start on Monday. The in-person freshmen, got to go to that class today because it balances out our lunch period. So, students are moving between classes. That's, of course, one of the big things of the high school schedules, that students are going to move from each teacher's class, from one teacher's class to another teacher's class. So students, get to enter the building, check in, have breakfast. If they're going to have breakfast, we have the DeWild Theater, which is right next to our cafeteria, so they can go sit in there and eat breakfast. Then they'll go right to their first period class. And they'll be in first period. And then we have a 5-minute passing time that's staggered by zone. So zone 1 releases about 30 to 45 seconds later, we'll release zone 2. And then about 30 to 45 seconds later, we'll release zone 3. It is a short passing period, only 5 minutes. But because we have the drinking fountains are turned off and we have built-in bathroom breaks into each period, and students don't have to go to their locker because they have a backpack with all their materials, we thought that that would be okay, that students have that shorter passing period because most of those other needs will be able to be taken care of during class. So then they'll go to their second period, their lunch and their SSP time, and they'll kind of go through that, and then we'll dismiss from lunch and go to third period, and then only 3 classes a day. So then they go home after third period at 2:45, and then again, all students really need to be out of the building by 3. Another really big change is we are going to be a closed campus for lunch. So, if you are a returner to West Valley, often students would leave at lunchtime, go across the street to McDonald's or to the Holiday, but we are going to close the campus for lunch. Just because we have those 3 lunches, and it, gets really muddled when kids are leaving and coming back. And another great benefit is right now we have free meals for all students paid for by the federal government through the end of the year. So both breakfast and lunch, all students are eligible for free meals. Or students can, of course, bring their own lunch from home if they want. We have microwaves available. We actually found another spot where we need another microwave. So we're going to make sure we have microwaves in all the spaces where kids can have lunch. So if they need to heat anything up, they can do that too. And of course, students can take their mask off during lunchtime. Lunch routines. I included a couple pictures here today because, we had great questions about lunch and spacing and whatnot. And so I took a couple pictures of a couple spaces in our building where kids will be eating lunch. And so each teacher is assigned a lunch space. So if you're in Miss Gillum's second period, you may be assigned to the pack hallway, which is that picture up at the top. So after I get my lunch, or if I already have my lunch, I can head to that space and everybody will have an individual seat. They're all 6 feet apart. And that will be my space to eat lunch, to sit and eat lunch. And then same thing, the commons and the cafeteria space in the other picture, we can only fit 3 students per each one of those big cafeteria tables in order to keep them spaced 6 feet apart. But so there's 3 spots at all of those tables spread around through the West Commons, which is that far area, and then the cafeteria commons there. With 3 lunches and the number of students that we have returning, it is right around 100 students per lunch period. But it's hard to see in this picture, but back behind that little short wall, there's a large space where students can line up to get lunch with 6 feet of social distancing between them. So we have that space there. Okay, now one thing, another big change, especially between first semester and now, is attendance. And so we weren't taking attendance first semester, now we have been. And of course, now we're going to be adding the in-person present for students who are returning in person. We continue to have RP for remote present. Absent unexcused if a student is absent from a class either remotely or in person. And then for in-person students, we'll also be bringing back those tardy codes. So students will be able to be marked tardy if something comes up. We don't anticipate that being a problem, but it's there. Great question. How do I excuse an absence? Awesome. Just like before, you just call the front office, talk to Miss Profit or Miss Rindlisbacher or Miss Nilika in the front office, and they can excuse absences for you. Same thing, a great parent question about what if my student has an appointment during the day? Gosh, that's a great question. And especially if you're new to West Valley, we have what we call a town pass. And so you just call into the front office, let us know your student's name, where they're going, when they need to leave, and we complete what's called a town pass so that they can show that pass to their teacher, come down to the front office. They need to sign out. That's always the most important thing, is we want to make sure students sign out. They can leave, you can call us when you're here so we know to have them leave. And if they need to, say it's just an orthodontist appointment or something else and they need to come back later, they can come back later. And we just got this amazing front door buzzer system installed. So students can just walk up to the front door and press the buzzer, and then we can let them in to come sign back into the building. So those were great questions from parents and good reminders of, especially for our new parents to the building. This was a question about what should I bring on the first day of in-person learning? So of course your mask or two, a device and charger. So one thing we know is that students aren't going to be logging on to Zooms or Google Meet while in the building. So they're not going to be joining classes through a video conferencing, but they likely are still going to have work that needs to be done on a device. So since most teachers, since it's still 50-50, teachers are still going to be putting assignments and work on Google Classroom. So students, when they come, are still going to need to be able to access that Google Classroom, and they may still be doing some collaborative work, both with in-person students and remote students through Google Classroom. So it will be important that they have a device, a portable device, right? So a Chromebook, a tablet, a laptop, that they can bring to school. If you don't have one of those, if your student's been using a desktop at home or it's a shared device and they can't bring it, we still have Chromebooks that we can check out to students. We do also have the advice of bringing the charger if you don't know the device's battery lifespan, right? And another teacher said, there aren't, of course, outlets at every desk, but if you have a, 6-foot extension cord that you want to throw in, we can also, of course, get it plugged in even if their desk isn't right against the wall with a charger. Earbuds or headphones in case there is a video that students need to listen to. I feel like all students have those with them at all points in times now, but just wanted to put that on there. A water bottle. So we don't have drinking fountains, but students will be able to have a personal water bottle in class that they can drink out of. I'm sure you've all gotten used to this too, of not taking your mask completely off, taking a quick drink of water. I said with a straw in there if you have one, because of course that's even easier to get a quick drink of water if there's a straw in it. A lunch if they're not getting it at school, and then a backpack or book bag since we're not assigning lockers, so they can take their materials with them from class to class. And since they only have 3 classes, our hope is, they don't have as many materials. Classroom environment expectations. These were just, that we went through with teachers, masks at all times, covering nose and mouth. And these are the every classroom expectations, right? No food in class, water only with personal water bottles. They are going to have, and again, class scheduled bathroom breaks. So every class has a little window of time in each period. Every teacher has a little window of time in each period to take their class, to walk their class to an assigned bathroom, to take a break, stretch their legs during class, and go from there. Of course, students aren't, they're going to have assigned seats in class and may not be able to move around as they often did, as we try to limit contact in classes too. Aside from those bathroom breaks, we are going to have really limited hall passes. So, the situation of where there's a known destination, a student needs to go see the nurse knows the student's coming. If they have a town pass to leave and they need to come to the front office. Okay, now if you have other questions, this is where, if you missed the beginning, I said stick them in the chat. There's a Q&A function on a webinar, so you can stick them in there. I'm going to go through the questions that I got turned in advance from parents, and then just some of the other questions that we know we've been getting a lot. So first one, is it possible to switch modes from remote to in-person at 4th quarter, or I'm trying to get this little thing to go away, or depending upon the virus? So the answer is yes. We know that families may have to make different decisions based on their circumstances. And so, and I think, for some families, we've seen this even since the survey was first put out, that they picked one, but they've changed their minds or they think about it. I know that you have to make the decision that's best for you. And so the answer is yes. Now, 4th quarter, if if we get closer to 4th quarter and you're like, yep, I want to transition out my student to transition back, if you can tell us a week in advance, and I'll probably get some more communication out about this as we get closer, just so teachers can plan their space, right? They have desks in their room right now to accommodate the students they know are returning in person with as much physical distancing as possible. So just so we can know and prep teachers in advance if they need to make changes. Also, remote versus in person, we expect that there's going to be changes depending on circumstances. Maybe your family has to quarantine because there was a close contact at, something outside of your family, or your family has to travel and has to quarantine. So, we know that, even though maybe you sign up in person, there might be a period where you have to be remote. So we know that that's going to happen, and we anticipate that, and just, to stay in communication with us is great, so we can let teachers know. And then another parent asked about another freshman only day. So we don't have one of those planned right now, either before fourth quarter or in the fall, but we will certainly keep that in mind. It's a great idea. I know it's a big building and can be super intimidating for freshmen. So we'll, kind of keep that in the back of our mind as these times come closer, to see if there's a way that we can accommodate freshmen getting a sneak peek or a preview. We do, I will say, if you check out on our website, there is a virtual tour that we had done where you can really get a feel for the layout and see what it looks like. That's on our website too. Contact tracing, how will parents be notified? So, I did it again. So this is something that we have worked through a little bit with sports teams, that we will work with our nurse and district administration to conduct contact tracing as quickly as we're able. And then we've, currently called and or emailed parents to notify them. Actually, we've always called, because it's been, pretty small in terms of teams. So that will be our hope, is that we'll be able to call all families to let them know, to make them aware, and what the quarantine pieces are. One thing that was noted too about a dashboard, how could we know what the situation is? And if you watch other districts in the state, the Matanuska-Susitna district has been in person all year. And they have a pretty detailed dashboard with case counts and school status per school. We don't have anything like that yet. We just have a dashboard that tells total cases and staff and students for the district. They are working on getting some more specific and recent information on that, though, so it will be changing in upcoming weeks. And then another parent asked about subs for teachers. Yeah, so we have a pretty, we have a plan in place for us that if we come to a situation where a teacher has to be out and we don't have a sub, or different things. So we have lots of mechanisms that we've been working on internally to try to control for that. But of course, if you listen to any of the school board talk, staffing is a concern, as that we'll be watching really closely as we go along. Labs for classes. So this is an interesting question, and I've gotten it from a couple people now. So so the question, as I understand it, is, if there's a class that is lab intensive, like a science class or a CTE class that has labs, could there be a way for students who are still remaining remote, who are choosing remote, to be able to access those labs? We're going to work on something for this, because teachers have asked for that. So we're going to see what we could do to work through some mitigation in that kind of a scenario, and then we'll share that with teachers so they can share that with families. But I know that's been a big question, or a question that I've gotten multiple times now. So obviously lots of people are thinking about it, if even a few people have asked it. So we'll work through something for that, and then teachers will communicate what plans we put in place for that. And I think and so there was one other question that I didn't get added in here that I asked about before. Somebody asked about vaccine for teachers. Have teachers been vaccinated? And I will apologize, because I do not know exactly which tier and phase it is. But right now, the phase and tier that our state is in is for people who are over 65 and healthcare professionals to be vaccinated. Those are the two groups that have vaccine appointments available to them right now. The next phase or tier, I think it's the tier, the next tier under that does include, essential workers, which includes school staff over 50. So the next tier that we believe that the vaccine will become available to does include teachers over the age of 50. And then the next tier after that one includes educators under the age of 50. So while at this point for our community, and I know different communities have done different things, there haven't been any vaccines specifically made available for teachers, but they are, or school staff in general, but they are part of the phase and tier plan that the state has put out. So, and that is everything that I had. So if you guys have questions for me, you are welcome to stick them in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A, and I will be glad to answer them. I will, since if you guys are typing, I will show this. This is the, it's on everybody's website, this 2020 to 2021 school year. And so it just has lots of information. Like there's one about the COVID-19 vaccine. talks about the risk zones, looks at the cases dashboard. Down here in health services is where the daily decision trees are. So this website just has a wealth of information on it. So that's where lots of my emails direct people to places like that, to these types of pages if you're looking for information. So, oops. All right. Well, that is everything that I have. So I'm going to stop my recording because I'm going to